Mercedes-AMG Interview Lounge.
We found a way to talk Leslie Odom Jr. into making some time for us, and this is awesome. Welcome to the show, Leslie. Good to see you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for making time for me. I'm happy to be back.
You know, it seems like it was yesterday, but it was actually March 24th that you and your wife, Nicolette, did the Elvis Duran morning show stay-at-home ball.
Yeah.
And then your little daughter crashed the whole performance. I was very upset about that.
That's awesome.
You know, working from home, we just had to get used to, you know, we don't have an upstairs, downstairs. There's no, you know, I'm outside right now because, you know, we've learned that, it's just, it is what it is over here.
I think this is great. I love the fact that, you know, when you're interviewing some of your favorite artists, you know, all of a sudden a naked baby runs by in the background, or if you're watching, you're watching someone try to do a serious news story and then a dog starts barking. It's like, I love it. I think it's great. I mean, you know, I don't know.
We've had to be really accepting. Yeah.
Well, I'm so glad you're devoted the next 5 hours to talk about your list of everything that you've got going on. We've got some fun things to discuss. We've got some serious issues we need to discuss. And I remember your farewell performance from Hamilton back in 5-6 years ago. You actually dedicated your performance to gun violence. I mean, do you remember that? I mean, that was a long time ago. But ever since then, Leslie, it seems like you have been constantly putting your voice out there to try to make our world a better place. How are you feeling? Do you think it's working?
Certainly not my one voice alone wasn't working, but I when I look at what's happening in the streets, I can't help it. I have so much hope, you know, when I look at people taking to the streets, civilly and uncivilly. I think they're both sides of the same coin. You know, you kind of need both things to happen. But people, the conversation has progressed in my lifetime in a way that I don't know if I ever thought that it would. You know, people are having really honest, open dialogue about racism, and it starts there. It starts with being honest about what we're living through, what we've lived through. You know, it starts there before we could heal anything, and people just for so long have not been willing to be honest. White people mostly, white people mostly, you know, really have not been willing to be honest. And for the first time, you're seeing the flowering of consciousness and people really going, for whatever reason. Now, I think it has to do with George Floyd is in a lot of ways, he's our Emmett Till. And that, you know, when Emmett was murdered and his mother made that decision to, you know, to have that open casket funeral. And she said, you know, you're gonna see my baby. You know, you guys hear about little black kids being murdered all the time, but maybe for the first time for a lot of people, that was the first time they'd ever seen it, and it kicked the civil rights fight into a whole new gear. And George Floyd, there was something about watching that. There was something about seeing that murder happen, those 8 minutes, that changed people. People hadn't seen it in that way.
You know what I was reading earlier, one of the interesting perspectives that we all got from watching that awful scene was you didn't see a close-up of George Floyd or that officer. You saw them both framed together. You were watching interaction between two people, and you saw the devastation happen right there in front of you. I thought that point of view, I think, made it extra powerful. At the same time, being honest, white people being honest. And we've noticed in the past week, we are quickly reducing our listener load. It's like, because we're coming on here, we're saying where it's at. We're talking about the truth and where we need to be putting our heads and our souls. And I was telling my boss, with each listener we lose and with each person that drops us on social media, I feel more relief. I feel like we can actually come in here and do what we need to do. With that said, Black Lives Matter, how has it changed from 5 years ago for you to now here in this month, in this year for you? Black Lives Matter, is it a little different in your definition?
Well, yes and no. I mean, you know, in the streets we see it's not just Black people that are out there. You know, I think when that started, you know, in Ferguson, those were mostly Black bodies that were out there in those streets protesting. In the streets, we see people standing shoulder to shoulder. It, you know, really is a coalition of people out there in the streets that are demanding change. So that is different than I think the way it started. But also, I think that there's a conversation that's happening. I see it on my social media feed. You know, white people talking to white people specifically. You know, you know, it is, you know, them handling some stuff, you know, between each other. There are Black people talking to Black people specifically, and then of course we're talking to each other. And so there are several conversations that are happening, private conversations that are happening in the public space, which, you know, just because of the nature of, you know, the COVID thing, you know, the fact that we can't actually gather as safely as we'd like to in spaces and have these conversations. We're having them virtually, you know, we're having them on Zoom and on Twitter and Instagram and stuff. So we're able to witness these vulnerable conversations. So I like I said, I just think that there's an honest dialogue. There's people that are talking about trauma that they've never, I'm one of them. You know, there's people that are talking about trauma and personal experiences that they've never talked about before, because there's a space that's been created for it. And so, you know, I really hope that there's mental health professionals, that there's, you know, psychiatrists and psychologists and therapists right on the front line of this thing, because I think that we're just at the beginning of something. And, you know, there's psychological trauma that people have to heal from. You can't heal it if you're not telling the truth about it. And people are finally telling the truth about it for the first time. And you're seeing it for some reason, something's been cracked open, and it's happening in every industry. I have a friend that's I have a brilliant friend who I went to middle school with, Michelle Morris, who's a doctor, and she's talking about racism in the medical field. Not just, you know, she's talking about, of course, the way doctors are treated, but the way they're treating their patients and how Black patients are treated differently than white patients. And I have friends, you know, of course, in the corporate world that are saying, you know, this has been my experience. It's different. People in entertainment, of course, are gathering together. So it's kind of like, white people need to brace. Our society needs to brace, because if your 4 Black employees haven't had the time yet or the space yet to come to you and tell you the truth of their experience, just know that they're coming. They haven't come yet. Know that they're coming. There's going to be some.
Oh no. Yeah, put that on the calendar. It's going to happen. No, yeah. I agree, and it needs to happen. And by the way, if you're just turning us on, Leslie Odom Jr. is here. We're talking, we haven't even started to talk about everything we need to talk about, but the most important first. And let's move to something you said. You're talking about people in different industries. Let's talk about people in your industry, the live performance community, the theater, the theater makers. I know that BIPOC, the Black, Indigenous, and People of Color theater makers, actually released a letter to White America Theater. I think this came out today. Well, I think this came out yesterday. It says, we see you. We've always seen you. We've watched you pretend not to see us. We've watched you exploit us, shame us, diminish us, and exclude us. We see you. So on behalf of your fellow theater makers, how do you see live performance, that industry, moving into the right lane, the correct lane, as far as how we're moving now?
I mean, we will see. Again, I am certainly resisting the call for like any kind of quick fix, you know, and any kind of quick answers for it. I certainly couldn't do that alone, you know, but what that letter I think is attempting to do was written by a coalition of people, brilliant minds, you know. And we all weighed in, you know. I signed that letter, but it really was just like, again, it's just we're not going to pretend that this is not happening anymore. Everybody is really asking themselves, white people first, but then Black people and everybody else. You know, I'm on the line right now with not just white and Black people, but the two questions, I think the most important questions that are emerging from our time are, for most of us, am I actively propagating a system that promotes white supremacy? Like, do I have hiring power? Am I carrying a baton, on a police department? Am I actively being used to propagate a system of white supremacy? Or right behind that, am I allowing myself to be used? How am I allowing myself to be used? Because if you talk about systemic racism, there's a lot of arms of systemic racism. That only happens because there's a violent arm. We're holding that system up all over this society. There's a real estate arm, and there's medical arm, and there's educational part of that thing, and so everybody in their life, it's like you're asking yourself the questions, and you're making the decisions to obviously either you continue to live that way and you go, this is the way I like it. But but if there is consciousness coming, flowering of consciousness, that what I hope and what I see happening is people taking responsibility for their corner of the street. They go, here's how I'm going to make some changes in my office, in my home, in my dealings with specifically Black people. Here's how I'm going to do my part to dismantle a racist system, and all you just have to do a little bit of research to really come to terms with the fact that you you did not design it. It was here. We inherited this system, right? But you benefit from it. And are you okay with that anymore?
Right. By the way, if you're just turning us on again, I want you to go back and listen to the replay later so you can hear the beginning of what you just missed with Leslie Odom Jr. And not only adding his valuable voice to the business at hand, of course, talking about racism in America and all the different arms it gives us. Let's talk about the list of work that you continue to do as well. I don't even know where to start here. I think I'm most excited about Central Park coming out on Apple TV. An animated show, musical, right? Musical show. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, you're right.
Your character and your family live in Central Park as the caretaker of the park, and then people want to come in and F it up, and put condos up. I don't know. Tell us what it's about, because it sounds like fun, and I love the thought that you can take the story like this and put it into animation.
Yeah, he's a park ranger. Owen Tillerman is the park ranger at Central Park, and so him and his family live there. And Owen has made it his life's goal, his life's mission, to protect that green space, that little patch of green, that little oasis in the concrete jungle, as it were. So, in the place you guys know better than anybody, where a patch of green is so precious, So
yes,
he's protecting the park from all the forces that conspire to devour it. And he's a sweet guy. It's a fun role, but he lives there with his family, and they as often happens with parents and children, they don't necessarily feel the way he feels about the park. It's not the most important thing on their list, but it's a sweet little family story. And those people that are looking for a distraction right now, looking for something to make them smile, Central Park definitely does that. Josh Gad is one of the creators. It's also Lauren Bouchard, who created Bob's Burgers, and it's a sweet show. Lots of music. Yeah, they wanted music to be a part of the storytelling language. Josh and I went to college together. People know Josh from Frozen, of course. He's Olaf in the movie Frozen. But Josh and I went to college together, and I've been working on Josh's weird little independent projects for over 20 years. This is the first time he's paid me to do one. So I'm happy to have it.
Well, finally, about time.
It's fun.
By the way, Josh is going to be on with us Friday. I guess he's coming on to talk about Central Park, right?
Good.
Yeah, Gandhi, did you have a question for Leslie?
I do. I mean, us all living in New York City, we are really missing Broadway right now. Do you have any inside info on how Broadway is going to be adjusting post-COVID-19?
I'm sorry. I'm talking to my friends, baby. I'm talking to my friends in New York.
Hey, here she is again.
Hello, little one.
She always.
Thank you, Dada. Okay, I'll be right in. Sorry. Do I have any?
Your daughter is out. She's out to crush our show. I'm telling you, your daughter is the enemy of our show.
It's so cute.
She has Leslie all the rest of the day.
I love it.
Okay.
It's so cute.
Live at home.
I'm sorry. You said
That is okay.
About live performance after this is all over.
Yes. How is Broadway adjusting? What's going on?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I think that they'd like to get back as soon as possible, but it's tricky. Those performance spaces are about the communal experience and the way those theaters are set up. That happens in close proximity. So I don't know. It's one of the reasons why I'm super excited about the fact that the Hamilton release on Disney Plus will, stand in the gap a tiny bit. It was shot live. They brought in cameras and shot us live right before we all left the show. And so it is a reminder of how powerful that live experience can be. But we're going to bring the experience right into your living room. So I'm excited to stand in that gap a little bit with that. I hope they figure it out as soon as possible because the theatrical live performance has obviously been so a pillar in my life. A lot of people that I care about in that city. So I hope they figure it out as soon as possible.
Can I just say that you have been in two of my favorite musicals of all time, Rent being one, but Once on This Island. The music from that show, I can listen to it every day, probably for the rest of my life. It was one of the best things I've ever seen. Loved it.
Yeah, me and my wife met in that show. Yeah, it's
you did?
It's a beautiful show. Yeah, yeah, it means a lot to us.
Oh,
wow.
See,
how great!
Such a good show.
The energy of doing live theater must. I'm assuming. I must make an assumption. You love all the different projects you're doing, but something tells me that when you walk out onto that stage, there is that electricity, that energy. And all of our friends here in New York City, and not only people who are on the stage, but back of the stage, people who are building sets, people who are doing everything in the industry, they're just dying to get back to work. I hope it happens soon in some form or fashion, because of all people, what it's like to walk out on stage and have the lights come on and you're like, boom, you're on. And you can't do what I just did. You can't go back and go, can you erase that? I didn't mean to sound stupid. No. We'll erase that part too. We'll erase what I just said. And then on top of everything else, you worked with our friend Sia, who we just adore, a movie called Music, which is coming out in IMAX on August 22nd, I believe. Let's hope we can get in there to see that. What's that all about, Leslie?
Yeah, Sia had this. She had a dream. She had a dream of directing an original musical, and this was the story she wanted to tell. It's a complicated story, but Sia only takes big swings. You see that from her. She's like our David Bowie or something. She's just or our Grace Jones. She's just a really special creative mind. So it was one of the weirdest. Maybe the weirdest little thing I've ever worked on, a little gem. It took me, I think it was about 3 months of working on it. And, so much of that time was just trying to get inside Sia's head and deliver for her, I felt like the last couple days of shooting, I was like, oh, I think I know the movie she's trying to make now. We were just chasing this whole thing the whole time, but I have seen that, and it's really lovely. It's a beautiful little movie. It's not what you'd expect, and it has Sia's geniuses all over it. Her whimsy and her wit and her politics. It's about a girl that is on the spectrum, on the autistic spectrum, and how she sees the world slightly differently. It's a musical, so lots of original music from Sia. I'm excited for people to see it. We shot that a long time ago too, so I'm excited that it's gonna come out finally.
Well, it's so funny how those of us who are not in the business, we just think, oh, this is coming out next weekend. You just finished that the other day, right?
Yeah.
No,
right?
This stuff's been in the can for a while. We're learning so much from you. Well, look, this list, of course, impressive, wonderful projects you have rolling our way to keep us informed and keep us feeling loved, and great music and acting. Of course, there's music. We got to play your song, Go Crazy here. But I just want to thank you. Thank you for sharing your perspective today. And thanks for taking time to be with us today. And you know what? Obviously, your daughter has a future on the stage, but she needs to wait until the stage director says, come out. That's okay.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for making time. And thank you for, these questions and this conversation is important publicly, but privately is most important. So thank you for taking the time to do that too, to ask the questions of yourselves and make the changes that need to be made. Appreciate it.
Well, our stage is always open for you. Thank you for being here. We've got to play Go Crazy. And we want to thank Leslie Odom Jr.
The Mercedes AMG Interview Lounge.